So taking off your old fan clutch system and putting in new fans, that's a really common upgrade to go with. Why? Because your fan clutches go bad, they drag on your engine, they pull down your horsepower, whereas your electrical won't do that. It'll keep your car cooler and it makes it more modern and slicker looking too. So today I'm going to show you how to install this dual fan system here into Steve's Blazer 6772 Chevy GMC, same. I'm going to show you different ways to wire it up and give you a lot of different options depending on what your needs are. So, you know what to do, man. Stay tuned. So now one of the things I like about this kit is that it bolts right in. I don't have to fabricate anything. I don't have to do any thinking. I don't have to do any math. And the electrical, for that matter, too, is just like pretty much a plug and play kind of system. So let's get started and see how easy this is to go in. So what we're going to be doing is, first, we're going to be taking off the little bolts that hold the fan shroud in on the top. Generally speaking, there's just one on both sides and that's it. Once these guys are out, at the bottom of this, there's just a slot that's holding on to the plastic radiator fan cover here. So all we got to do is just pull that up some and it'll get out of that slot. And then we're going to push it back some. And then when it's pushed back, we can get to our fan clutch right here a bit easier and take it off. So sometimes you might want to take off your fan, your radiator hoses and things like that, but your fan belts and such, you can get it back a little bit further and make it a little bit easier. If your coolant's old, your hoses are old, blah, 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 kill two birds, one stone, get that all taken care of one shot. I'm going to try to do it without taking any of that stuff off because it's all in good shape. So let's see if I've got enough room to get in there and take those off. Generally speaking, you'll need a 1/2 inch on there. So let me get that and get started. Now behind the fan clutch and your fan right here, you're going to find the bolts that hold it all on. So you're going to need to loosen these up. Now I'm not actually going to be taking all 4 of them out. I'll only be taking 3 of them out and leaving the 4th one in just loose. And that'll normally work on most of these. It'll work on this one because it has a slot. I'll show you when it comes out. Yours may not have the slot that I'm talking about, but in which case you'll have to take all the bolts out, and I'll show you a couple little tricks about that when I get this out a little bit further. So now I've got 3 of the bolts out of there, and this 4th bolt, I just need to loosen up enough to be able to slide this off. Looks like I got to loosen it a little bit more. And the problem is if you take off all 4 bolts and you still have all of your belts attached, then sometimes this pulley will pop off, and then you're going to have to loosen up all your belts and do this, that, and the other. But if you leave this last bolt in, then generally it won't pop off and it'll save you a little bit of time. There we go. So coming on out. Watch those radiator fins too. So here you see that these are slots right here. So that's why you're able to just take off 3 and then you can simply pull it out. And this is what your fan clutch looks like right here. And basically what this does is when the engine is hot, this heats up and it turns on, so to speak, and that makes the fan spin. When it's cool, it will not engage and the fan won't spin. If you're taking off in your car and it sounds like a jet engine taking off, usually that means that this is jammed shut and it's on all the time and making that sound. So for all of those weird little reasons, we're going to get rid of this guy and go electrical. With the fan clutch out of the way, we can take our shroud right on out. Basically just like that. So now the bolts that we took out of here, if we were to simply screw these back in, more than likely they're going to be too long. They're typically going to be fine thread, but you'll find variances from different manufacturers and such. But at any rate, you're either going to need to find smaller bolts or you're going to need to cut these down. So let me get that set up and I'll be right back. So I tested the length of our bolts on our pulley right here, and they are actually short enough to work, but that may not be the case in your situation. So what I'm going to do is show you how to cut down a bolt the right way in case you don't have one in stock. So what you would do is you would simply put a nut on the bolt and screw it down to about where you figure you're going to have to cut off the amount that you need to cut off. When you're cutting it, what you're going to be doing is cutting, and you're going to be turning it at the same time. If you just cut right through it, when you get to the end of that, it'll have slag that'll pop off, and then it makes it more difficult for you to screw the bolt back in. But if you're turning it the whole time, then you're getting a nice even cut pretty much, and you won't mess up your threads or get any extra slag. Then what you'll simply do is unscrew your nut, and then it'll clean up the threads on the end. Sometimes you might want to screw it up and down a couple of times, but when you get done with that, you'll have a nice shortened bolt that should be able to screw right into your receptacle nice and easy. So with that tip done, I'm going to get this done. Stick around. So everything's bolted up, double checked everything, and my fans are ready to go in. But before I do that, I want to figure out how I'm going to be doing my electrical, because like I said before, there's a lot of different options. I can have this turn on both fans at one time. I can have it turn on one fan at a time, and then when I turn the air conditioning on, the second fan will engage. So you've got a lot of different options on all that kind of stuff. You've got different options on your temperature sending units that tell the relays to turn on or not. So I'm going to start with that first, I think. Now this right here, this is the regular looking temperature switch that you typically see on top of your intake manifold or on the side of the engine. And this is really the way I prefer to do it. I want to have this as close as possible to the thermostat. I want to have it before the thermostat because that's the hottest spot in the engine, and when that gets hot, I want my fans to turn on. So this is one way to do it. This is my favorite way to do it. When you're installing something like this, you can't use Teflon tape on there because what'll happen is you won't make contact. This here, you'll notice it only has one wire at the top, and that is where you're going to be connecting a ground to. That's where these wires right here go to. And when that grounds out, it turns on the fan. It cannot ground out if you put any kind of silicone or any of the plumber's tape on this. Now I actually do put a little bit of plumber's tape on it, but I only put it at the very top, not on the bottom 3/4 here. So this is my favorite way to do it. Another way to do it though is with this sensor right here. Now this sensor, what it would do is go right into your radiator. It's generally best to put it as close to where the upper hose connects because that'll be the hottest coming in. You don't want to put it down on the bottom because that's the coolest water. When the engine gets at the operating temperature, that's when we want the fan to come on. Now, the one thing that is nice about this is that it does have a dial on here, and you can dial this to exactly where you want it, what temperature to turn on and off. One of the reasons that this may not be my favorite is just that I'm not real thrilled with sticking something through my radiator. Now this is specifically made for it. You just simply put it into the fins of the radiator. You'll get yourself a number 1 or number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. You'll gently move the fins aside, and then you'll be able to install this probe. You can see it's got enough wire here so that you can install this switch wherever you want. And again, one of the things that we're doing before we put in our new fans is mapping out where we're going to be putting all this kind of stuff. So I'm going to be putting this guy here in my engine. I won't be using this guy here. All of my relays and my fuses and such, I think I'm going to put over here just because I've got a lot of open area over here. Now the instructions, they come with all the different ways of wiring up the relays in your fan and such, but I'm going to give you a quickie little thing here. If you don't catch it all, it's no big deal. The instructions come with a kit. So what a relay is it's basically just an on and off switch. Now, if you put a switch in your dash, for instance, and you had to run a power wire all the way up there and a power wire all the way back, that's just a lot of traveling for all the power. A lot of times the switches go bad and such. So these are specifically made to go close to whatever operating system you have. You'd be using this for fuel pumps or these fan relays, stuff that pulls a lot of power. This way we can get the switch close to the battery. We don't have a lot of power drain going all the way up, and we don't have to worry about burning out a switch on our dash. Now, how these guys work is, of course, you've got power going to them. That's these red lines right here. And on these, you'll notice that it has the fuses here and a short line. So I'm going to be taking this right here. I also want you to notice, you may not be able to see this, but right on this, it's labeled battery, 12 volts. And whenever you're going to have any electrical done, you want to have a fuse as close to the battery as possible, because if this was to get a chafe in it and ground out anywhere, that wire's going to fry for that length. But if you have a fuse close to the battery, the fuse will blow out and it'll save your wiring and possibly your truck from burning down. So you'll notice that there's two fuses on this that I'll be attaching to this power block that's right on the side of the fender. Now, the other wire that looks red probably on the camera because it's red and orange here, this wire right here, you'll notice on here, or you might be able to see or not, I'm not sure. Can you see that? That says battery, 12 volt ignition. Now what that means is that this is going to be hooked up to some wire, typically under the dash, that is only going to have power when you turn on your ignition switch. So I'll get a test light a little bit later and we'll turn on and off the ignition switch, see what turns on and off, and we'll find an acceptable place to put this. I'll get to that a little bit later. And then your blue and black wires right here. Now these are labeled. One says ground, one says 12 volt fan. Okay, so these grounds right here, I'm going to be attaching down here on the bottom. I have to map that out before I put stuff in. I don't want to have everything in there and then try to work around it with drilling holes and such. And you'll notice that these prongs that are on here, these are separate. So they're not joined together to go into the receptacle of the fan. And the reason that is that if you installed it and then you find out that the fan is pushing forward, which is bad, it's not pulling in, which is good, all you got to do is take these two wires and switch them around, and then it'll simply change the polarity on the fan and blow it in or out. So with that all basically set up, I'm going to go ahead and get started on this. I'll get down a little bit of ways, and then I'll show you how it looks in just a bit, so you know what to do. Stay tuned. All right, so quick little update here. When you're working with all these wires, it's kind of like spaghetti on your plate, and you're going to want to clean that up. So what I'm going to do is I'll take the wires and I will group them into who's going left, right, up, down, etc. And I'll tape them together about every 4 or 5 inches, and that's just going to make everything nice and easy and controlled and easier to work with. So let's take a look at what we got so far. Now, originally what I was going to do is attach the power to my little power block here on the side, but it's really a little bit too small. This little wire right here is just not going to be big enough to pull all the power the fans are. Here I went ahead and I just attached it right onto the side of the terminal of the battery, and you'll notice that the fuses that this comes with are 30 amp fuses, and when it originally starts up, the fans start up, they pull a lot of power, and sometimes they'll blow the 30 amp fuses, so the kit comes with 40 amp fuses just in case. Now once the fans get going, they actually don't pull that much power, but that first startup is a bit of a chunk. So now we've got our main power wires coming through the original wiring harness here, and we're coming down to our relays right here. So you'll see our large red wires in the back, and that's where our power's coming in. Then we've got the large blue and black wires here, and that's where the power's going out. These other wires, what they're doing is turning on the relays. And how that's happening is we have this wire right here, and that is giving us power to the relays when the ignition is turned on. And so when we put a ground on this, that's going to turn on the relays, and that's going to turn on the fans. How they ground out is with the trigger switch that is on the relays here. So this black wire right here, this is going on down through my original wires here, and it's leading up to my sensor that I have on the side of the engine. Now all I need to do to test everything is simply ground out that ground wire, and then I can hear my relays click. I don't know if the microphone's picking that up or not, but these are clicking, so we know everything's good to go. Now let me go ahead and climb underneath the dash, and I'll show you where I hook that up. Then I'll come back outside and I'll show you where I hook up the fans. All right, all you're gonna need is a nice simple test light. I got a nice special fancy one here, but you don't need anything like that. Nice simple test light's all you need. And all we're going to be doing is just simply, you'll notice here, you can see that there's these little protrusions sticking out right here, okay? So what we'll need to do is simply test each one of those and see who has power when the key's on. So we know that's got power, and because this is fancy, we know we got 12 volts. We want to make sure we have 12 volts, otherwise there won't be enough power to actuate the relays. So you'll only have 2 or 3 of these on there. I can tell you that you don't want to use the one on the very top right here. That did not work. This one right here, it's this cluster. So this one right here, we got lucky, and we've got a piggyback on it right here. So here's our orange wire coming from the front. All I had to do is just go right into this piggy bank, and we're all good to go. So now I'll show you what we do at the front. Now with electric fans, we don't want any air coming in from our sides, okay? So we've got some rubber right here to go on this edge right here. And then on the top and the bottom, they're a little bit bigger and fatter here, okay? And it's got one-sided tape sticking on there. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to tape this onto the radiator. We're not going to tape this onto our fan shroud. In order to make sure that these are in the right spot, you're going to want to go ahead and set the fan in there, see exactly where these 2 lines are going to match up, go ahead and clean off the surface, tape these on, then you'll be able to install them. Then we don't have to worry about air sneaking in around from the sides, robbing our power of this. Now down at the bottom here on the radiator, you'll see these old metal clips right here. So sometimes these will rust off, but there's a hole that's originally in the bottom of the radiator core support. All you'd have to do is put a slip nut or a J-nut on there, and you'd be able to bolt that on. Just be careful that your radiator doesn't go down too far. Over the years, people put on different weird things, so be careful of that radiator. So I'm going to go ahead and trial fit this, get my foam on, then we'll hook up the wires and we'll see this thing below. All right, so here we can see we've got a red wire on top, black wire on bottom. We are going to take the blue and black wire and go to the red. Then we are going to take the black wire and go to the black wire. We'll do the same thing on the other one, and then we'll test our fans. We'll make sure they're blowing in the right direction. Then we'll take a little bit of tape and tape these up so we don't have to worry about them in the future. Then we'll get some zip ties down on things and make sure that the wires are all tied down, keeping away from sharp items, hot items, all that kind of stuff. So now that we're all hooked up, I'll turn on the ignition key so we've got power to the relays, and then I'll ground out my trigger switch. When I do, we'll hear the fans come on. So you can see that's really pulling a lot of air. Let me double check. Okay, they're both blowing the right direction, so we're all set up. I'm going to go ahead and connect this to my sending unit. Then I'll turn the truck on and I'll let it run. I'll wait until the fans turn on. Then I will wait until the fans turn off again. It's a good idea if you get one of those inexpensive thermometers, the infrared style, And then you can check the temperature of the engine. Normally what I like to do is put the temperature gauge right on the thermostat and see if it's when it's turning on, when it's turning off. Test it a couple of times before I hit the road. So I'm going to do that now. So you can see that if that was in there and you didn't know any better, you might think that that's the way the truck came. I like this because it's not overly flashy. It blends in with everything here. But if I was going to be going with something like an LS engine, it would fit with that too. So we're able to cross both worlds, so to speak, with this setup. My name is David Welch. Next week I'm going to be back at Brothers Tech Center and I'm going to do something else cool to another cool truck. And if you don't subscribe, you're going to miss it. So make sure you smash that like button. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram because, you know, you should. We'll see you, man.